Springtime fishing is among us. What do you need to throw to catch more fish? We're going to talk about that. Welcome back to another episode of 5 Minute Fish Talk, a show where I've got 5 minutes to discuss all things fishing. Now, I just loaded 5 minutes on my timer here. You know what that means? Woo! Time to get real! Alright guys, I think we can all agree that we like the subject we're talking about today. The reason being is because it's springtime bass fishing.
Wait! Before I go too far, I want to thank Melissa Ellinger for this fantastic video suggestion. Her channel's linked below. Let's get back to it.
And if you're anything like me, nothing gets you more fired up than a little bit of springtime bass fishing.
Hey!
Oh my gosh, I love coffee. Enough about coffee, let's talk bass. Before we get into what lures you like to throw, what lures are going to really catch you a lot of mondos, one thing to keep in mind. It's going to be very much different for the person that lives in California versus the person that lives in Florida versus the person that lives in Michigan like me, or Kansas, or wherever. You get the picture. Somebody might be living overseas in Europe and they'll be like, hey, how do you catch your bass this time of year? It's going to be a little bit different for you. So bear with me a little bit. Make sure to take my suggestions, apply them to your area accordingly. Ask questions if you'd like. Drop a comment below. We got a lot of smart people watching the show. They might be able to help you out. I certainly can try. Let's get to the juicy fun part. What lure should we throw? What lure should I throw to catch a mondo bass? I want to make sure that I catch a big one. Well, I think we can all agree that numero uno is a jerkbait. Now, a jerkbait is the number one, and here's why. When you first get out there and you start springtime bass fishing, it's your first time on the water, the water's 42, 43 degrees. Well, guess what? Those bass are going to be suspended. So guess what? You want your lure to be suspended. The only thing out there that does it this nicely is a jerkbait. And it'll just go, and then it'll just stop. And then that bass is just sitting there like, hey, what's that? It looks like a minnow. Let's slurp it up. You know how it goes. And I've caught some really, really nice fish throwing these things. And they're really, really fun. Honestly, it's one of my favorite things to throw. It's one of my favorite bites of the year. There's nothing quite like it. I would definitely recommend picking up a couple jerkbaits and giving it a shot early in the spring. Here's the thing though, guys. Once that water gets a little bit warmer, I think we all know that a jerkbait kind of loses that special sauce. And so you have to switch to something a little bit different. Now, here's where the second bait that I'll throw after that jerkbait bite is done is a jig. That was awesome. I'm so pumped that I just did that. A jig, a finesse jig, and particularly, I can't speak. There's jigs of all types, sizes, varieties, shapes. You got swim jigs, you got football jigs, you got flipping jigs, but the finesse jig for me, coming from the Midwest where there's a lot of shallow rock, the finesse jig just crawls right through it and it looks like a nice tasty crawfish. And I gotta say, the bass love it. The bass just absolutely slurp it. So if you have shallow rock, throw a finesse jig. If you have deep rock, maybe a football jig. If you have more grass, that's swim jig. So on and so forth. Apply it to your area, guys. Now, here's something that can work for all of us, no matter where we're at, and that's a crankbait. You can kind of customize it to what area you are. If you got a lot of shallow wood, you might want to throw like a square bill, but if you got rock, something like a wiggle wart or a deeper diving crankbait that can kind of just crawl along those rocks, that'd be a good one. But if you got grass, lipless crankbait, just ripping it above that grass. I've got, like, this thing is ugly. This thing's been beaten up like crazy. The reason being is because during the early spring, I rip this thing through grass, I bang it off of rocks, and I have caught more fish on this hard bait than probably any in my tackle box. It absolutely crushes them during the spring. You know, kind of on the same spot here, guys, moving baits, we got the next one. The next one is chatterbaits, spinnerbaits. I group them together because they're very similar. If I'm throwing a spinnerbait, it's generally around standing timber and wood, whereas if I'm throwing this chatterbait, it's more so around grass. And I love both of them. They both catch huge fish, similar to a crankbait, right? They're both moving, but it just depends on what kind of structure and cover you're fishing. A lot of times I'm more target fishing with these two, whereas these ones I'm fishing over big areas. But last but not least, guys, is I got one more bait. Can you guess what it is? If you watch my channel, you're going to be very mad at me because I always bust this thing out. It's still rigged up. It's a Ned rig. The reason I go with a Ned rig, are you mad at me? Because, you know, a Ned rig catches fish all year round. A Ned rig it's just awesome. So when you got a day in the spring where the bite's tough and you just can't catch them on anything else, that guy right there will catch them. I can guarantee you that. But to summarize all of this, guys, to summarize all this is depending on where you're at, depending on what kind of waters you're fishing, I think we can all agree that it's going to look a lot different for everybody. And the great thing about spring is that every single fishing lure on the market pretty much works during the spring. Whoa! So don't think by any means you have to throw one of these. You might be already throwing a buzzbait by the time I'm throwing a jerkbait. 5 minutes, man. I am timing this thing great. Woo! Let's go. Make sure if I missed something or if you have a question on anything, drop a comment below. If you have any suggestions for next one, make sure to drop them in the comment below. If I choose yours, I will feature your channel at the beginning of that video. So overall, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of 5 Minute Fish Talk. If you liked what you saw, make sure to subscribe. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time. Oh my gosh. Z-Man. Attention Z-Man, attention Z-Man. Your Ned rig got stuck to the ceiling. That was the funniest thing I've ever seen.